Humans on the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we are doing a little look at Vernalizer. This is the archetype that got revealed last night. I already did my reaction review video kind of thing last night, so feel free to check that out. But here's the lowdown, okay? This is a new archetype. They're all, I believe they're all fairies, but they are earth support. So they're earth fairy support. Really interesting to note here. And the cool thing is all of them, I believe, have an effect that can reborn any earth monster from grave. The problem with this is that all of them also, after doing this, will lock you into only being able to activate earth monster effects for the rest of the turn. Nothing else, no other attributes. So that makes it a little tough, right? Because we can't just look at any archetype that has earth monsters in it, or even is predominantly earth. It has to be an archetype that will only ever need to use earth monster effects, or can use earth monster effect to still have really solid value. And that's where the trouble comes, but still, I mean, this still supports like a big facet of the game. So I'm going through all the archetypes that I found. I did last night, like really late last night, just did a skim fest of going through all the earth monsters in the game to come up with archetypes and generic cards that might have some cool utility here. So without further ado, let's just jump into this thing. All right, so starting off here, we have our Zodiac stuff. The one thing with Zodiacs is like, do they need the support of another engine? I don't know. We don't even have Dryden, so how helpful is it really to even like reborn a Zodiac from grave? I don't know. Helps us play through interruption, I guess, but still, like, this is an all earth archetype, so you got to keep it in mind. It's one of the best ones you've ever seen. So yeah. Next up here, we have X-Sabers. This is a deck that's been needing support for a long time. I don't know exactly the synergy here, but they have a lot of cards that are Earth. So yeah, I think this one can be considered here. I honestly don't know too much about this archetype, but it could have some workable stuff there. Next up is Warrock. Sure, like, I don't know. They're all Earth. They don't really do much, but they're all Earth, so that's cool. UAs are a pretty cool one because UAs can struggle with extending, but they also don't put stuff in the grave quite that easily either. And that's the other thing you got to consider too, right? Because prior to using any of these new monsters from the Vernalizer archetype, you want to already have a good earth monster in grave to reborn off of their effects to get really good value. So I don't know, but UAs like could be something. I'm not entirely sure. Triamid just doesn't feel like a finished archetype, so that's cool that they can have some potential extension there. Traptrix Vermelio. Traptrix are a little more interesting than the other ones just because they have a link 1, so even just normal summon a Traptrix makes Sarah. You're putting a Traptrix in grave. And if it's something like Vermelio plus the extension piece, you're going like Vermelio, getting you an interruption, linking it into Sarah. Then you'll reborn Vermelio off of one of the Vernalizers. Vermelio's second effect will trigger on special summon, which will then trigger Sarah to set you another trap hole. So you should ideally be able to get maybe a rank 4 and 2 trap holes off of that like 2.5 card sequence with Sarah on field, which is pretty powerful. But you are locked into Earth, so it depends on what that does lock you into certain rank 4s, but maybe you just go redo her and play the control game that way. But that's a little more of an interesting one to me, for sure. Next up is Subterrors, all Earth stuff, and this package also somewhat makes Nemesis Warrior a little more interesting because one of the Vernalizers is actually just kind of like a foolish burial. I believe it's this guy, right? He pitches himself and another monster or Vernalizer fairy to send one earth monster that can be normal summoned or set from the deck, and then he special summons an earth from grave, but with a different name than the monster you sent. So being able to send something like Nemesis Warrior, or maybe send something like Guru, or I don't know, whatever else you'd want to get in grave to kind of be set up something that you can get back later on, that could be something interesting. I think Subterrors are one of the interesting ones to look at for sure. Next up here, Fossils. Fossils are cool, but they just don't feel like they have a legit win condition. It feels like their boss monster is cool, but he's only good in like certain matchups, and they have like funny battle phase OTK kind of cards, but like that's all they really are, right? So temper expectations there. Next up is Punk. I think the problem with Punk is I think a lot of their main deck monsters are Earth, but not their extra deck monsters. And so the one thing I worry about is like not being able to have that payoff. But I guess just for the soul extension, I mean, summon Zayameen back, grab another one of the Punks. You probably have a normal summon at that point. Well, if you have a normal summon, like E-Tele is another extender that you can take advantage of in the deck, right? So you can just kind of like plop a bunch of cards, but you are locked into Earth, so you don't just have access to the full-on rank 3 toolbox or anything. So you got to be careful with that. Next up is Melffys. I think Melffys are one of the ones that make a little more sense. Just being able to support them really easily is pretty nice. They definitely need it for sure. But yeah, they're like one of those decks that you look at and you're like, this deck can't be good based on its artwork, and then it's like pretty good. And this artwork kind of fits it too. Madolche. Madolche is a pretty good one as well, especially since like you can like tribute, right? Like Angeli get, beat or whatever, summon into something else. You're linking off your making Exceed monsters. It's pretty easy to get Madolche's engrave for the most part, because you usually do for like Hoot Cake anyway, but then you can reborn stuff and just keep extending potentially. I don't know how legit good it is, but there could be some potential there. Electromagnet Warriors. This is one where it's kind of like we need to see better support. Like if they got their own ABC Dragon Buster equivalent boss monster where like just banishing the Magnet Warriors from grave would get him out from extra deck, then this engine becomes even more interesting, right? Because the guy who Foolish Burials gets you Ascend from deck, and if you open another one in hand, Ascend from hand. Or if you open something like Beta, you go Beta search one of the Vernalizer, pitch the one you searched from hand to then send the last one from deck, and that like 2 card combo gets you the whole setup for a boss monster, which is pretty cool, for sure. So that's something. That's certainly something. Gem Knights, it's Gem Knights, so whatever, but I guess these could be kind of support for Gem Knights, potentially making their FTK a little more consistent. I don't know. I have no idea. Then we get to the giant facet of just like Earth Machine stuff. Now, I know some of these engines do lock you into machine monsters specifically, but still, almost this entire deck is all Earth Machine. So you have Scrap Chimera, or Scraps in general, you have the Machina stuff, really cool. Ancient Gears. I know for the most part you're not using a huge Ancient Gear engine, but you might be using Box at least. Whatever. Infinitrax, of course, and then of course Trains rounding us out. But I'm pretty sure almost everything you're ever using in this deck is all Earth, and so it does make it pretty good at just putting Earth monsters in grave to take advantage of these cards as extenders. So I could see something where like this machine stuff is taking advantage of, but we'll see. Next up is Gokis. This is the last one I put here. The problem with Gokis is that while Gokis, the whole archetype is Earth, they've always wanted to make use of stuff like Ice Sold and other, just like Warrior or just like kind of combo turbo support stuff. The Phantom Knights engine is all dark and stuff. And so if you're just locked into Earths, you don't really have the ability to set up like Insane Interruption with Goki. You're just kind of stuck to setting up like the Towers guy and moving on from there, which is just mediocre at best. So it's a yes and a no for Goki for sure. And then we get to the generic stuff. So this is like stuff that doesn't necessarily work archetype wise, but they are interesting cards. It's just like interesting. If I just have an easy way to set this up in grave, reborning this is pretty nasty. Resonance Insect is certainly one of these, because even if you hard open Resonance, you go like normal Resonance, link it off for Almirage. This would be before you've even done anything. You're not even activating Almirage anyway, so that's fine. That triggers Resonance Insect once to search a level 5 or higher insect. Then you can use one of these extenders to whatever, do something, and then reborn Resonance again, link him off again, and get another search for a level 5 or higher insect. So this could be a way for you to search like Contact C plus Sting Lancer, and you'd only need to be activating Sting Lancer on your opponent's turn as Disruption. So in those instances, I'm kind of just sitting there going like, yeah, like that's pretty sweet. Like, I don't know. That could definitely be something. I think that's like a really interesting one. You also have to keep in mind Gokipole is an Earth monster that's sendable straight from deck with the other Vernalizer. So that just triggers to search a level 4 insect like Resonance. And there you go. That's another way to get you into this. So this could be a really cool package to splash with that stuff for sure. Just because most of the stuff you're searching is going to be activating on your opponent's turn anyway, if they're not Earth. Next up is Barrier Statue of the Drought. If you want to play a more control strategy, you could go for something like Drought of just get him in grave and then be able to reborn him, extend him onto the field. There, you could also look at the Koakin Myrus, whatever, the good ones, the ones that like negate monster effects. But the problem there is this isn't a rock archetype, so those guys have to reveal like a rock or another Koakai Miru on the end phase, and so they would just die. But Barrier Statue is still a pretty good control card. I mean, not a lot of decks are playing a ton of Earth stuff, or if they are, it's not enough for their strategy to like full on play through him. So as long as you can protect him, like that's pretty cool. Dino Wrestler Pancratops. I mean, this is just a generic option. We're like, okay, going second, I side in Pancratops, or maybe I keep it in the main. I summon him. I use him to break a board a little bit. And then as I'm using my pieces, I'm just like, you know what? Let me just revive Pank. He already uses effect, so he can't use it again. But now I just have him on the field. I can pass, and I just have his Dryden effect for the opponent's turn. Like, that's pretty cool. It's actually not too bad at all. Fossil Dyna Pachycephalo. I know this doesn't technically could have fit in like the fossil section, but this card generically, I mean, again, if you could just get this engrave and reborn it, neither player can special summon. So like once you kind of get set up there, maybe you're in a position where you can just win the duel straight up from there. So that's obviously pretty good. King Tiger Wangu, kind of in a similar vein as like him and the Drought, just like floodgatey monsters. Being able to reborn him back, and then he's kind of just like a mini Slifer the Sky Dragon. Pretty decent floodgate effect, so you can definitely win duels that way. And I believe the last card we have here is Planet Pathfinder. Just being able to get Pathfinder engrave, revive it, and then tribute it to get a field spell. What's really interesting too is that you could, even if you opened this, you could normal it, tribute it to search a field spell. He's not once per turn, so you could use these cards to revive him again, and you could search a second field spell. The problem there is that you need to have a field spell that gives you like payoff in the right way, because like what's it doing? What's it really doing for us if we get a field spell like Magical Meltdown? Because we can't activate Alistair, we can't activate any of the other effects of invoke stuff because there's no earths in there, or anything else like that. So it has to be strictly earth, or maybe it's something like search Necro Valley and just play like a stun game that way, search Mystic Mine, whatever, and this engine just makes it a little easier for you to get to that kind of stuff. I don't know. Just a card that's really interesting though, especially since you can use them twice in the same turn for sure. Seems pretty cool, but yeah, I mean, it's a cool archetype. It's really interesting. It definitely seems like there's potential here, and I'm sure we'll get more cards for it as well down the line, which may open things up even more. But the generic ability to just like extend into more earth monsters is pretty good. So I'm curious to see where this deck goes, where people try to flub it into. I want to hear your thoughts though. Please let me know in the comment section down below what other stuff other than what I mentioned here today do you think could potentially make use of Vernalizer? Because I'm curious. It feels one of those decks that's just, there's something here. It's just going to take some digging, some research, some testing to really find what has like that good enough synergy where it really becomes like in its home, like really where it belongs. But I'll leave that up to you guys to figure out. So let me know in the your thoughts down below, all that stuff. Subscribe if you have not yet and you want to see more stuff from your boy down the line, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.